Hello, this is a video about this very special and splendid book, Natural Law in the Spiritual World by Henry Drummond. What a beautiful, beautiful book. This is going to be going through some of my notes that I made whilst I was reading this amazing book. Because coming from a very staunch atheistic perspective to start with, started challenging myself around the time which I started reading Chesterton, of really exploring the opposition, if you like, or the spiritual world, which is definitely obviously dominated by Christianity here in the West. And really going into it and looking and exploring, and obviously the work that I'm doing with Jung as well, reading through him, is taking that from a more psychological perspective. And it's been a very fascinating and interesting journey, and I've realized that Christianity is not the worst thing in the world. There is good and bad elements to it, as there is in anything, and I find that that balance between the two very fascinating. But yes, anyway, let's get on with Natural Law in the Spiritual World by Henry Drummond. Also I've been watching a lot of near-death experiences and whatnot, and I've just for sort of conjecture's sake, let's say that there is such a thing as a soul and a spirit and this sort of thing. When we are born, I don't know whether we are pre-existing, whether I've existed for time immemorial, and when I come into this incarnation of myself, all memories are sort of are obfuscated from your consciousness, and as over time you sort of remember who you are. That's one sort of perspective on it. But yeah, it's just sort of speculation, and there's going to be a lot of speculation because we are talking about spiritual things here. So yes, natural law in the spiritual world. I'm just going to be reading through my notes and stopping and explaining anything in further detail if I think it needs it. Lost in a catalogue of dreams, quite pleasant really. A capital I for is co-location. We have truth in nature as it came from God. Revelation, everything, revealed as is learnt. Orthodoxy versus heterodoxy. Is there any problem nature cannot solve, or are we part of her process ourselves? Minds which such forms of truth may touch, pointedly expository, necessary aberration of light which distorts every new idea while it is yet slowly climbing to its zenith. Tabulating revelation equals nature, rebuke, adulteration, exegesis, veins of surprise, arbitrate. He is standing upon actual things, among fixed laws, and the integrity of the scientific method so seizes him that all other forms of truth begin to appear comparatively unstable, except morals. So, are morals eternal? As far back, even in pre-Christian times, certainly a lot of Greek philosophy, Socrates and whatnot, is pretty much all centered around virtue being one of the most important traits for anyone to possess. So yes, I think as long as the human condition has existed, morals have been a big part of it. This leads to positivism or atheism. Science cannot overthrow faith, but it shakes it. Inviolability, I think that's how you say that word, inviolability. If this is a disease, it is the disease of nature, and the cure is more nature. For what is this disquiet in the breasts of men but the loyal fear that nature is being violated? Deep down, I do think spiritual feelings or intuitions are very closely connected to the natural world. So that's just a little note from my own mind there. The disclosure of the naturalness of the supernatural. To be loyal to nature is to be loyal to the spiritual. And then we get on to why and how, or natural to supernatural, supernatural to natural, and wisdom is mutually beneficial. Quick little quote here from Milton. What if earth be but the shadow of heaven, and things therein each to other like more than on earth is thought? Right, so I'm going to get into how and why now. This is more of my own sort of perspective. So how will lead you to good and evil, but why will lead you to choose good. Okay, so for example, how is like the scientific world. How do we do something? It's not really concerned with whether doing that thing is good or bad. For example, building a weapon. You can see, we can figure out how to do it. How would this be most effective at doing that outcome? We don't question whether that outcome should be done or not, or far too often we don't anyway. And then obviously, so that's the why bit. The why in my opinion is more important than the how. The how is obviously very important. I live in a world of modern luxuries, which have all come about by basically people figuring out how to do things, how to manipulate reality. So I'm definitely not against how, but I do think why is slightly more important. So basically, can we do it, which is sort of science, and then should we do it, which is morality, or this is where Mr. Drummond would say that morality and religion are very, very closely knitted together. Which, to be fair, there is something to say for that, but I like to keep the distinction still very very clear in my own mind, because Christianity especially has a hell of a lot of illogical fallacies, which I really can't swallow. But there is also sort of how Jung would look at Jesus or Christ as the perfect form of yourself. Psychologically speaking, having that perfect form is a very, very important part of morality, I would say. Anyway, so yeah, we've got the how and the why going around. Homiletically, the temporal is the husk and framework of the eternal, and thoughts can be uttered only through things. Criterion, analogical evidence, is generally more successful in silencing objections than in evincing truth. Okay. Nature does not prove religion, it interprets. Possibility, fruitful proof. Legal religion is only the extension of natural justice into a future life. True, many forms have to be perfected before the realm of the spiritual nature must be read in its own right. It is not, of course, to be inferred that the scientific method will ever abolish the radical distinctions of the spiritual world, but not such a unity of conception as should be founded on an absolute identity of phenomena. One can escape doubt only by escaping thought. Spiritual, natural, etc. Plato's prisoner, if not out of the cave, at least has his face to the light. Okay. So I would say as well, as we're going to get more into his thought, he's going to go into evolution. So he believes that you are born. This would sort of work in with Immanuel Kant's sort of two types of knowledge as well. So you get the empirical, which is what you learn. You learn how to interact with your environment. Environment is very important to teach you how to do things, and to some extent to teach you morally as well. But then you eventually end up with the a priori knowledge. So things like the classic example is all bachelors are single. You know that, you don't have to prove it, whereas if it's sunny or raining, you have to go out and actually prove it. But yeah, if you don't start off with the a priori knowledge. it's discovered or learnt as we grow. And he would say, so Kant would stop there, or at least I would think so. And then Mr. Drummond says that there's then the next level up, or the next evolutionary step up, that is the spiritual. So it's so the flesh grows, and then the mind grows, and then the spirit grows, sort of thing. Anyway, okay. Evolution totally dependent on time. Science of perception tested against the rules of the universe. Fear of time is generated by biological axioms. The elimination of mystery from the universe is the elimination of religion. If the purification of religion comes from science, the purification of science, in a deeper sense, shall come from religion. There are many harmonies, but still there is but one harmony. Even laws have their law, the law of continuity. Continuity allows the safe confines of sanity. Laws are only modes of operations, not themselves operators. The law of continuity seems to be snapped at the point where the natural passes into the spiritual. Biogenesis is the law for all kinds of life. Abiogenesis, or coming into existence, then we may know all that is. By no means we may only know all that be known, and that may be very little. So he's got some here: science, continuity, sanity, objectivity, empirical, spirit, love, morals, concepts, a priori. So the highest spiritual law is love. I would definitely agree with that. I don't think there's anything greater than that. It's basically none of us would be here without it, because if a child or infant doesn't have love, as soon as it comes out of its mother, it's pretty much destined to perish. But yeah, I think that's something definitely to that. I would say the highest form of anything is love. I would say love is truth, or certainly truth should guide you to love. Interesting. I have to think about that one. All right, all subgenres are good, which culminate in this ultimate truth. So phenomena are parallel laws, which make them so, are themselves one. Law in the visible is the invisible in the visible. Law is great not because the phenomenal world is great, but because these vanishing lines are the avenues into the eternal order. We look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. Again, so things within time, scientific, the how, sort of my surroundings, my environment, it's temporal, exists in time, whereas morals or virtues pretty much exist indefinitely, as far as I'm aware. That's what I think at the minute, anyway. The visible is the ladder up to the invisible. The temporal is but the scaffolding of the eternal. Okay. Yes, okay. Life can only come from life. The spiritual life is the gift of the living spirit. The passage from natural world to spirit world is hermetically sealed from the natural side. What is science but what the natural world has said to natural men? What is revelation but what the spiritual world has said to spiritual men? Just as life only comes from life, spirit can only come from spirit. Morality touched by emotion. That's Matthew Arnold. Morality touched by life, our souls. A religion without mystery is an absurdity. Religion or the spiritual world definitely benefits from the mysterious, as do all ideas and imagination. All science pretty much starts off as science fiction, and that's how your brain works, is by putting different possibilities together and then calculating outcomes, and then obviously in the case of science is testing them against reality to see if they actually work. That cognition or that inspiration is very, very important. And mystery is a big part of that. You know, is I wonder what happens if I do this, or I wonder what happens if I paint a devil with a Christian cross on him, and play around with the game between good and evil in the realms of perception, rather than just, you know, in a theological sense. So yeah, it's interesting. And mystery is a good thing to keep it going, although it's also very good for your sanity to have repeatable truths, which is where environment and reality and morals are very important. Growth is the work of time, but life is not. Death is the snapping of a chain, the waking from a dream. If a man neglect himself for a few years, he will change into a worse man and a lower man. We are wont to imagine nature is full of life. In reality, it is full of death. Salvation, neglect, escape. A man who has been poisoned only neglects the antidote and he will die. It makes no difference whether he dashes it on the ground or pours it out of the window, or sets it down by his bedside and stares at it all the time he is dying. He will die just the same, whether he destroys it in passion or coolly refuses to have anything to do with it. And, as a matter of fact, probably most deaths, spiritually, are gradual dissolutions of the last class, rather than rash suicides of the first. It is the very forces which we associate with life, which, when their true nature appears, are discovered to be really the ministers of death. Life, the sum total of the functions which resist death. Spirit, the sum total of the functions that resist sin. To sin is to neglect the functions which resist death, and therefore neglecting the soul is the slow death of it. If we sow nothing, we will reap nothing. Sow something good every day. If you do not use your spiritual eye, it will close, just as the moles who live without light. Use it or lose it. So this is a very interesting point that he brings up. In nature, obviously, something like the mole, as it goes on in its evolutionary passage through time, if you don't use something, then it basically evolution over time will either improve the gifts if you use them or take them away if you do not. And he says that the spiritual part of us is exactly the same. The more that we use it, the more that it will strengthen and become stronger and more of a potent force. So that was a really quite interesting insight. I like that idea, and beginning to practice that idea myself. Men with 10 talents, men of large gifts and burning energies, either direct their powers nobly and usefully, or misdirect them irretrievably. Our sins are here within us now. Become pure in heart. The pure in heart shall see God, or God with the extra O's, I like to say, good, because the God of the Old Testament is not really that much of a moral role model. Although Jesus wasn't too bad, to be fair, apart from the stuff with the slaves. But anyway, the important thing is to have one shining example of good and truth. And if you want to call that God or Jesus or whatever you want to call it, you know, then go for it, because that is really, really important for your psychology and your mind and your spiritual growth, I would say. Our temptation as ordinary men is to neglect to sow at all. The interest of our talent would be so small that we excuse ourselves with the reflection that it is not worthwhile. And by refusing to see, they have waived their right to see, or nature, spirit, will grimly honour your neglect. Again, he's saying if you don't use it, you lose it. Every day is a reckoning day, every soul a book of judgment. Nature judges the flesh this way, spirit the soul. The sin of yesterday, as part of its penalty, has the sin of today. Okay, so he's got a little bit of Latin here, which I'm probably going to butcher. Nunquam alvid natura alvid sapientia dicit, or dicit. Never does nature say one thing and wisdom another. So that's an interesting little quote there. Organic growth, 1, spontaneousness, 2, mysteriousness. Growth is natural, requires no effort beyond natural conditions. The soul grows as the lily grows, as long as subject to time. To grow is always superior to an inanimate existence, no matter how beautiful. Yeah, so that again, he's talking about life being superior to minerals, so the next step up sort of thing. We are most unspiritual always in dealing with the simplest spiritual things. The soul rises slowly above the world, pushing up its delicate virtues in the teeth of sin. Spiritual character is merely the product of anxious work, self-command and self-denial. Miss Drummond was a Scottish, I would probably say Protestant, although I do think he goes on a little bit later. I'm not entirely sure, but he was, the whole self-denial thing is, it's good to a point. Delayed gratification can bring greater rewards, but I personally believe you have to strike a balance. You can't just live a life of, well, you can, but it's not for me anyway. The constant self-denial is not good. You have to find a good balance. There's nothing wrong with a bit of self-denial if it strengthens and produces greater good. But when it becomes, your life becomes a constant misery, it's probably not so good. You think about all these sort of Catholic priests who, basically repress their sexuality for their whole life, and then lo and behold, when they get left alone with small children, the worst happens. But yeah, anyway, growth is mysterious. Character in normality is formed by external influence of social opinion and the voice of the world. And then there is character formed by a mysterious source. Spiritual growth is a process maintained and secured by a spontaneous and mysterious inward principle. Nature gives the energy into us to grow. The God, or good, gives us the spiritual energy with which to grow. Grace, too, is as free as the air. A man will often have to wrestle with his God good, but not for growth. In the modern age, death itself is ethically dead. What death is depends on what life is. To a physiologist, the living organism is distinguished from the non-living by the performance of certain functions. In death, the organism ceases to interact with the environment. Congenitally. Spiritual death is a want of correspondence between the organism and the spiritual environment. Environs conscious or unconscious, conscious natural or unconscious spiritual. Again, Mr. Young, looking at spirituality from a psychological viewpoint, would be very very open to the spiritual world being a large part of the unconscious. Something we do know that happens and is true, and that's where all mystery comes from, isn't it? Subconscious. So therefore religion comes from the subconscious, or spirituality, maybe. Anyway, the moon and stars are part of it, although in the light of day he may not see them. In its widest sense, environment simply means all else that is, circumscribes. As we rise in the scale of life, however, it will be observed that the sway of death is gradually weakened. Develop spiritual taste buds, and you will learn how to taste the spiritual. Remain senseless, and you will experience nothing. So again, he's talking about developing this spiritual sense. Worth putting some time into, I think. And if nothing else, then it will strengthen your moral convictions of what is right and wrong. Good and evil, virtue, very important. Always have that perfect goodness too. Although we will always fail to obtain it, we must always try to seek it. That's what I think anyway. Intolerantly tolerant. There's a little bit of Chesterton seeping in there. Okay, so God, or good, is not confined to the outermost circle of environment. He lives and moves and has his being in the whole. Those who seek him only in the further zone can only find a part. There is nothing apart from God, or good, to save the world from moral death. If good did not exist, would you still behave morally? Yeah, I think that might be my own question answered there. If good was uncertain, would you still act morally? Well, a lot of people do get confused, and especially when money or careers or any of the sort of social pressures of modern life come into it. And I'm guilty of this myself, of making morally bad decisions in order, because I think that what is here in front of me is more precious, so I'll ignore that, and it's just an inconvenience when all I'm doing is lying to myself. So yeah, and I'm probably still going to fail at that in the future too, you know, but I'm going to try. At least I'm going to try. That's the most important thing. So yeah, and we are uncertain of basically everyone's uncertain of what's going to happen, basically when we die or whatever. But we do have the choice to make it, and the fact that we have the choice in the first place is a good thing. So that's why I would say, in the balance between good and evil, you still get to choose whether you want to be good or evil, and that is a good thing. So there's more good than evil. Enough clues to continue observed behaviour and long-term reward. Nature and morality provide all for virtue, except the life to live it. Unbelief is the closing of the heart to the potential of highest love. The true environment of the moral life is God or good. To refuse to cultivate the spiritual relation is to deny the soul its highest right, that of evolution. So again, he's talking about the evolution of the soul. You can dwarf a soul just as you can dwarf a plant by depriving it of a full environment. I do not wonder at what men suffer, but I wonder often at what they lose. Ruskin. So yeah, he says about environment being very important, and I totally agree with that. I think the healthier an environment you are in, the more likely you are to have good ideas, etc., etc., etc. I think that's a huge part of it. So yeah, surround yourself with good people and good positive places if you want to improve spiritually. Okay, physical death is the final stoppage of natural correspondences with this sinful, perhaps, world. To die in any environment is to withdraw correspondence with it. So yes, once we leave this world, if we leave at all, but obviously there's a strong belief from Mr. Drummond's point of view that we will, and that all of this is just an illusion sort of thing, the Plato's cave. So once we withdraw from this environment, we stop all correspondence with it. So obviously every action has a reaction, but then when we are withdrawn from that environment, we therefore have no further interaction with it. If he does not kill sin, sin will inevitably kill him. They that are in the flesh cannot please God. In many ways, the limitation of the natural life is the necessary condition of the full enjoyment of the spiritual life, of the full enjoyment of the spiritual life, sorry. I'll say that again. In many ways, the limitation of the natural life is the necessary condition of the full enjoyment of the spiritual life. It is only a limitation which can secure the illimitable. Life is not a sin, but the love of life may be a sin. And again, we're getting into this dangerous territory here with religion, for me, where you're talking about this reality, just a dream. Yeah, okay, that's cool, but you still want to look both ways before you cross the road. And then obviously in extreme cases you get these I don't know what to call them, but these vile people who, you know, suicide bombers, that sort of thing, which completely detached from reality and end up murdering innocent people for this total brainwash. So you have to be very careful down that road. Again, that would be like Fear and Trembling, when Mr. Kierkegaard, or however you say his name, is talking about the psychological aspects of Abraham sacrificing his son, and then, you know, it was only because he believed enough that, and, you know, at the end of the day, if you're going to sacrifice your firstborn son, nah, I ain't getting into that. Anyway, back to this. All that is lavished upon life is lost in death. Love can be given in life, and time is the medium with which it can be spent. So that's very true. And choose wisely, yes. The whole cross is more easily carried than the half. Yeah. A very dangerous thinking to shun reality in favour of faith belief. Again, this is probably my notes here, talking about the suicide bomber type of the extremist of the when religion takes over your mind and ends up making you do atrocities, murdering, you know, killing, basically acting against morals where it should be for morals. Both are equally important. Whilst alive, at least, any atrocity can be justified if the perpetrator considers reality to be fiction. It is the consequences of the interaction with reality that initiates the moral framework we build outside of it. Yes, yeah, to a certain extent. Fire hot, touch fire, burn, learn the lesson there. You could say the same in a moral sense. If you do something wrong and you're like, man, I wish I hadn't done that. But then, was it a wise man makes a mistake, but only a fool repeats it? Yeah, there you go. Right, the more correspondence with life, the greater the form of life. He's talking about different evolutionary forms of life here. A jellyfish is ill-adapted out of its natural environment, i.e. on land. A human is ill-adapted out of his. We may be masters of this reality, but perhaps we are just but babies in the next level up. To live, just as a jellyfish isn't very good at moving around land, but perhaps we aren't very good at moving around in the higher form of consciousness, or spiritual world. To live is to correspond, and to correspond is to live. Yes. Okay. Life eternal to know. Does a spirit enter a fetus? Again, this is where I started off at the beginning. Whether a soul comes in, a pre-existing soul comes into a fetus or new life, or whether that is simply just growing, I don't know. It's very difficult to think in these terms with any sort of clarity or certainty. Mystery, eh? As in the natural, so in the spiritual, there is a principle of life. The mental and moral world is unknown to the plant, but it is real. Yes, okay. To a plant, it would be supernatural. Okay. Do plants think? Well, we don't really know. I wouldn't say we know, because it's always wisest to say we don't know. But if we just go with all our observable evidence and data, you would say no, they don't. So that's very true. Just because something is not apparent to you, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Things are natural or supernatural according to where one stands, their perspective, basically. As the plant doesn't understand the thinking world perhaps doesn't really understand the spiritual world, perhaps. The natural environment gives men their natural faculties. The spiritual affords them their spiritual faculties. When the spiritual life is discovered in the laboratory, it will possibly be time to give it up altogether. It may say, as Socrates of his soul, "You may bury me if you can catch me." So yes, I think science sort of has its arrow aimed at God's heart, but perhaps when it pierces it, it will destroy itself. Who knows? Breathing now an atmosphere of ineffable purity, shall he miss becoming pure? Evolution, he's talking about the evolutionary process here. An eternal life demands an eternal environment. Death is the necessary result of imperfection and the necessary end of it. Dangerous thought, putting death as perfection. Yes, again, that very dangerous slippery slope with hardcore religion. It does not occur to us how natural the spiritual is. Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that. No man can select his own parents, but every man, to some extent, can choose his own environment. So that's true. You can't, as far as I know anyway, unless you do choose sort of before birth, although it would be pretty ludicrous if you have a pretty, disgusting, horrible time of it. But let's say, we just have no idea. We come into it. But even if you are dealt a really shit hand in life, you can still try and make it better whilst you're in the environment and able to interact with life. Carl Sempers, the natural conditions of existence as they affect animal life. My environment may modify me, but it has first to keep me. Without environment, there can be no life. In nearly all the acts, we credit everything to the substance which we can weigh and handle. It is certain that in most cases, the larger debt is due to an invisible environment. The cardinal error in the religious life is to attempt to live without an environment. To examine ourselves is good, but useless unless we also examine environment. Excuse me. Whatever energy the soul expends must first be taken into it from without. Now, the great point in learning to live is to live naturally, a simple union between the organism and environment. He understands, like all other energies, spiritual power is contained in environment. The natural life owes all to environment, so must the spiritual. Now the environment of the spiritual life is good, or God. As nature therefore forms the complement of the natural life, good or God is the complement of the spiritual. We fail to praise the ceaseless ministry of the great inanimate world around us, only because its kindness is unobtrusive. True poetry is only science in another form. Up to a point, the natural environment supplies man's wants. Beyond that, it only derides him. How much in man lies beyond that point? Very much, almost all that makes man man. The agnostic is right when he trumpets his incompleteness. The problems of the heart and conscience are infinitely more perplexing than those of the intellect. Yes, I would say that was definitely true, although they are two very closely intertwined things. What a very strange thing it is not for man to pray. It is the symbol of his littleness and of his greatness. Here the sense of imperfection, controlled and silenced in the narrower reaches of his being, becomes audible. Now he must utter himself, but the higher thought and the conscious and the religious or spiritual life can only perfect themselves in God or good. Even in a pre-Christian age, Socrates, know that you know nothing, is, I think, the wisest way to go. I don't know if there's a God or not. I can't tell you. My instincts tell me that there is good and evil, and I want to go towards good as much as I can. Again, having that perfect, what would it be, like an ideal, a concept to head towards, is very, very important. So yeah, we'll go towards that, and never, don't let arrogance blind you, thinking, oh, I'm the most intelligent person in the room, or human beings are the most intelligent things in the universe, etc., etc. I think it's much, much wiser to keep an open mind and be like, well, and just be honest, I don't know. What did Hemingway say? He said, every thinking man is an atheist. And I think that's true to some extent, but then I would say every honest man is an agnostic, because no one really truly knows. And so it's best to keep an open mind. A true theology must begin with a biology. Extilio nihili. I'm not going to attempt that. The first demand is that being conscious and having this power of choice, the mind should have an adequate knowledge of what it is to choose. He uses Jesus as the perfect example. Shame about the slavery bit, which I said over. But the perfect example is crucial, especially the belief in an unalterable and perhaps unattainable perfection in order for moral sanity to flow. Yep, really true. To feed is to grow. You can choose the food, but not the consequences once consumed. What you put into your body, once it's passed in your body, you can't really. That process just happens automatically. You don't really have any control over it, although you can choose what to put into your body to start with. But now he's getting on to semi-parasitism. Parasitism. But the parasite has no thought for its race or for perfection, any shape or form. It wants two things, food and shelter. The parasite, she argues, not only injures itself but wrongs others. It disobeys the fundamental law of its own being and taxes the innocent to contribute to its disgrace. So yeah, again, he's very self-sufficient and sort of has a very strong sense of what is right and wrong, and this is his whole. He's taking the natural observations of parasites in nature and then applying them to the human life and to the spiritual world. From the moment the creature took to relying on an external source, it began to fall. It slowly lost in its own person all that it now draws from external aid. If the end of life is merely to escape death and serve themselves, possibly they have done well. But if it is to attain an ever-increasing perfection, they are backsliders indeed. So again, if life is just pointless or purposeless, which I genuinely think if you actually truly believe that, like some people say they do, then you might as well just top yourself, because what is the point, yeah, so he says, well, if that is the point, then a parasite's done very well because it just hasn't bothered with life. It's just survived to the end, and then that's it. It's gone. But if life is a test or sort of thing, then it's done very, very poorly because it's not used any of its faculties. It hasn't grown the legs, it hasn't grown the arms, it hasn't developed the senses. So any principle which secures the safety of the individual without personal effort or the vital exercise of faculty is disastrous to moral character. Always try harder to get better and follow good, do good. For the strength or weakness of any religious system is best judged from the form in which it presents itself to and influences the common mind. And now he gets on to Roman Catholicism offers to the masses a molluscan shell. So he's talking about the semi-parasite, like the hermit crab, basically. How it, instead of forming its own hard shell from experiencing life and growing, it instead decides to use a more convenient, easier way out. And he's basically going to compare Roman Catholicism to that of going to church as a customer rather than as a true believer, sort of thing. Anyway, cheap religion is the desideratum of the human heart, and an assurance of salvation at the smallest possible cost forms the tempting bait held out to a conscience-stricken world by the Romish Church. Entrust themselves in idle faith. Yeah, I think that's his biggest sort of criticism, and something that I very much agree with. Idle faith is very dangerous. So I'll just go to church whenever I feel like it, and once they've given me the wafer or whatever, I'm cool. I don't have to worry about anything else that's cool because I go to church. I'm a Christian. I'm safe from all evil. That's not how it works. You've got to try to be good and make the right decisions. Entrust themselves in idle faith to that venerable house of refuge which for centuries has stood between God and man. And yet the moral test, in spite of the difficulty of its applications, will always and rightly be preferred by the world to the theological. Yes, the natural life, and not less than the eternal, is the gift of God. But life, in either case, is the beginning of growth and not the end of grace. To pause where we should begin, to retrograde where we should advance, to seek a mechanical security that we may cover inertia and find a wholesale salvation in which there is no personal sanctification, that is parasitism. We fail to appreciate the meaning of spiritual degeneration or detect the terrible nature of the consequences only because they evade the eyes of sense. Without food, exercise is impossible, but without exercise, food is useless. Any principle which secures food to the individual without the expenditure of work is injurious and accompanied by the degeneration and loss of parts. What is meant to be a stimulus to thought becomes the substitute for it. Look for yourself, find your own faith, and not idle shall you be in seeking it. I think that's definitely my note, because our churches overflow with members who are mere consumers. Yes, I think that's very important as well, like a point I mentioned earlier. A formal religion can never hold its own in the 19th century. It is better that it should not. We must either be real or cease to be. We must either give up our parasitism, or our sons. So yes, again, he's talking about using your spiritual faculties and not letting someone else basically tell you that everything's fine. You need to make the moral goodness towards spiritual growth, not have someone else tell you or give you the illusion that everything's fine and you don't have to worry about it. I've got it, So yeah, I do agree very strongly with that. Infallibility always paralyzes. A lot of the problems that I originally had with Christianity comes from infallibility, that it's the word of God and it can't be wrong, and then anyone with a logical mind can read the Bible from cover to cover, as I have done, and basically pick it apart. That's one of the big problems. If they just sort of said, oh, well, it's, you know, it's more of a guideline, as probably most good Christians do use it, then it makes a lot more sense. But when you say it's the Word of God, it's absolute, it cannot be any other way, then that's where so many problems arise in religion. Anyway, all moral, intellectual and spiritual effort is over, and a cheap theology ends in a cheap life. Infallibility is mere credulity. Credulous. It is a complacent and idle rest upon authority, not a hard-earned, self-obtained personal possession. But truth in the Bible is a fountain. It is a diffused nutrient, so diffused that no one can put himself off with the form. It is reached not by thinking, but by doing. So yes, it's very important to do good, as well as to think about what is good, is to do good in reality. It is seen, discerned, not demonstrated. It cannot be bottled whole, but must be slowly absorbed into the system. Truth in the Bible is an orchard, not a museum. An idle life is death anticipated. Goethe. Religion is morality touched by emotion. I'm not quite sure about that. Moral beauty is the product of the natural man, spiritual beauty of the spiritual man. From mineral to flesh to spirit. The mineral remains in the inorganic world until it is seized upon by a something called life outside the inorganic world. The natural man remains the natural man until a spiritual life from without the natural life seizes upon him, regenerates him, changes him into a spiritual man. When you get down to the atomic scale, yes, all life is made out of atoms, and if you were to dissect them, they would basically become lifeless atoms, or inorganic material, or different chemical compounds. But there is that magic that puts them together and forms life, which we still really don't have a clue what it is. So that's a good sort of pocket of mystery that still needs exploring, and the God of the Gaps does fit him very well there. And then again, he's saying the same thing, is that there is that mysterious thing that takes hold of you, and takes from the flesh and basically into the next step of evolution, which he would say is the spiritual world. Moral man is highest in nature, but the spiritual man is an embryo in spirit. I think we've already covered that. All but divine insensibility. Perfection only exists in a sphere above this one. Must always aim. That is the test. And that's the end of my notes. So yes, sorry if that was a bit long and rambling, but I think there's some good points in there. Yes, Mr. Henry Drummond, Natural Law in the Spiritual World. Very fine book. Yes, I'm looking forward to exploring more this crossover between theology and morality. Very interesting, which I will do in future episodes. Obviously, that you don't read a book that overnight. It's taken me a few months to get through that, because I've been going to my local library once a week for a few hours and putting in the time. So I shall continue to do that. So in a couple of months, I'll probably have another video like this. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've put some wisdom and goodness out in the world. So cheers. Thanks.